Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. It was still August, but the weather was still unusually rainy and gloomy. It was drizzling rain, and the wet drops were drawing sad arrows on the window of the cabin, with their point going somewhere down. The driver of the old half-ruined truck was in exactly the same mood at that moment. David was 32 years old, and he had spent the last 7 years driving a truck all over the country. His job as a truck driver did not bring him much joy, but on the other hand, it allowed him to travel and to see something new every day behind the window of his truck. Sometimes it helped him to distract himself from unhappy thoughts about his life. And now, on his way back from a rundown village in the north, David was involuntarily immersed in reflection on his daily life. Lately, he had been having a bad time at work. David's boss, John, had an unbearable temper with the director of the trucking company where David worked, and it got worse and worse. Not a day went by that John did not call David and complain to him about something else. He delivered the shipment too late, or didn't show up for another professional checkup, and the last time they had a fight just before the current trip. John, well, I can't take it anymore. How much longer can you drive this bucket with nuts on the roads? Either give me a normal car or expect that this jalopy in the end will fall apart right somewhere on the road. David stood in front of the boss, covered in oil and mud. He had just finished another inspection of his truck, which of course showed the same thing as the last time. Half the parts needed urgent replacement. Why are you calling the shots here, David? With a sneering squint, John snarled. I told you there's no money for repairs. We haven't been able to make any money this month, thanks to you. You're always getting stuck somewhere. So, if you gave me a normal car and not this monster four-wheeled, so I would not get stuck. The trucker argued. The radiator's always malfunctioning. You can't even do a couple of dozen kilometers when everything's starting to smoke. John just threw up his hands and held out. Well, dear, I don't know what you have and where you're smoking, but I do not have the funds to renew the fleet of cars. I gave you a bonus last month, didn't I? You did. You could have used it to do something useful for your work, to buy parts, for example. David almost grunted in annoyance. Are you kidding me? Are you talking about the $15,000 that I begged you for almost 3 months? I couldn't afford to pay my rent. Do you understand that? With my salary, I bought and installed everything I could in this bucket on wheels myself. The chief raised his hands sharply and made an impenetrable face. That's enough, David. I told you, I don't have money for your whims. What now? I have to give you a new car every time you think something is wrong. Others drive and do not complain, by the way. This conversation is over. You already make my head spin. Why did I hire you? You're ungrateful, David. Oh, you're ungrateful. David only waved his hand at this passage of the boss, saying, everything is clear to you, and it was not the first time. John constantly squeezed some of his hard-earned and life-threatening money, and then rebuked him for the minimal requirements for the condition of the working car. The truck David was driving now was probably about 20 years old. The engine was constantly whistling and rustling, and the hours the trucker had to spend in all kinds of repair shops, trying to get the dying mechanism to work again, were steadily deducted from his own salary. On this trip to the village, the man drove alone, although the rules required him to work with a partner. But Zach, his replacement, had been taken ill the day before the trip. Of course, David immediately realized what kind of sickness his colleague had caught. David, Zach said into the receiver with a slurred tongue, I'm sorry, friend, but there's no way I can go out with you today. His partner hiccuped, as if to hint that his condition was quite deplorable. My head, I can't stop cracking. I've been suffering for 3 days now, he mumbled. David only sighed in response. Zach's endless drinking sessions were getting on his nerves all the time they had been working together. But what could he do? He could not drag him drunk on the trip. especially since John, for sure, was already aware of what was going on. "I warned John, don't think," said Zach with difficulty, as if guessing his thoughts. "He's the man of the world. He understands everything." "Yeah, the world." David sniggered back. "Zach, do you ever plan to stop drinking? It's the third time in 2 months you've let me down like this." For a second, there was an awkward silence on the phone, but not because his partner was embarrassed. The sound that came a moment later clearly indicated that the main friend of this poor alcoholic was now a plastic basin. "That's it. Bye." Zach mumbled into the phone and then passed out. "God, when is it going to end?" David thought to himself. "It's impossible to work like this." At that moment, John walked by, and David immediately asked the supervisor what he called straight up. "John, why didn't you tell me that I was going on the trip alone?" Zach just called. "He's been drinking again for a week." John reluctantly turned to his employee. "Well, I warned you. Look, I don't have to run to you every time with all this nonsense. Or do you think I have nothing better to do than regulate your relations with Polunin? You're both grown men, but you can't figure it out between you." David felt a bitterness inside. Resentment and indignation were flooding him upside down. "It's been months since you've given me anyone instead of this boozer." David tried to be indignant. "What is this? How am I supposed to get on the road when I don't even have a shiftman? Am I not supposed to sleep on the road?" John put his hands in his pockets and walked a few steps toward David. "Why do you keep complaining, David? Every time I listen to you, you're always getting screwed over and trying to make a buck. You know I'm not the one who can't find you another partner, right? No one wants to work with you. Look at you, always so gloomy and joyless, and complaining all the time. Who of the guys would want to go on a trip with such a bore? Aren't you ashamed of yourself, John?" The trucker couldn't stand it. "I do 3 trips a month, back and forth, practically no days off. After that, what's the sense for me to drink with the men? I'd rather stretch out my back and sleep it off. Or are you saying you don't know how the rest of your employees go on a trip under the influence?" John abruptly grabbed his employee by the collar of his jacket and hissed angrily, "Quiet, don't yell." The warden looked around quickly. "That's the team spirit, you know. Whose fault is it that a truth-teller like you can't fit into their society? I do not care how they go on a trip, as long as the goods arrived safely to the final point. Well, yes, they drink. Well, that's a matter of 10. The main thing is that they work well afterwards, and the rest, you know." David decisively shook off John's hand. "Do you realize that your actions fall under the article?" One eyebrow, at John's, went up sharply. "What are you trying to do? Rat me out? You want to be a snitch among your own people? Keep in mind that after that, no one will hire you as a driver or a janitor. What do you want?" David remained silent, his teeth clenched together. He'd had enough trouble in recent years. For all his love of justice, to lose even this job would be suicidal for the young man. Nevertheless, David continued to stare angrily at his boss. "Tell you what," said John at last. "Why don't you run me through this trip without incident, and I'll give you a nice raise for it. A salary and a half, okay?" "You're lying again," David said sternly. "As if I don't know how many years you've been promising me this raise. This time for sure I will," John assured him seriously. "Just keep your mouth shut." "Okay. We'll see," David answered him briefly and headed for his car. David knew he was disliked in the company of the local drivers. An orphan and a truth-teller, David had never been eager to discuss anyone behind their backs with his colleagues, even over a bottle of beer or something stronger. The young trucker always behaved very quietly and never told other colleagues about his past. Perhaps because of this, the others considered David to be some kind of convict who just did not want to talk about how much time he had served and what crime he had committed in a distant penal colony somewhere. But David didn't ask anyone to be his friend. All he needed was a reliable partner with whom he could drive the required kilometers and deliver the cargo assigned to his car on time. David grew up in an orphanage and was used to being always alone. His teachers often said that he was an introvert by nature. He did not need a lot of people around him, just someone who could truly understand and accept him for who he was. Trucker's parents died when the boy was only 4 years old. They died on a ship that crashed in the Black Sea. Little David was then left alone with his elderly grandmother Miranda, except that the old woman, alas, could not survive the death of her beloved daughter and son-in-law. A few days after the funeral, David's grandmother suffered a stroke, and the old woman could not survive it, passing away a couple of hours after the medics arrived. Since then, the boy lived in the orphanage. There he had to constantly defend his own territory and a tiny space in the playroom, which David, growing older, took a fancy to play chess. The boy really liked to sit down with the chessboard by the window and play long, complicated games where his opponent was either himself or some famous chess player who had recorded all his brilliant moves in a textbook. When he left the orphanage, he moved to La, where he has lived as a loner to this day. David had no luck with women. After experiencing unhappy love once, David could not find a worthy candidate for a wife. They did not match in character, or their feelings faded too quickly, leaving behind only the bitter residue of empty, burnt-out passion. In the end, the young trucker decided to stop torturing himself and his heart, and began just to live the ordinary life, which every day brought him more and more such unpleasant surprises from his superiors and coworkers. Now, as he drove down the road, darkened by the rain, David didn't know if he would ever be able to change his life for the better. The only thing he was sure of was that he'd better stop at a gas station now. A glance at the dashboard showed that the diesel in his rumbling truck was about to run out. This meant that the trucker would again have to stall to get back into the fleet, and David did not want to pay John another part of his own salary. The rain kept coming down. Having checked with the navigator, the man made sure that the nearest parking lot was only a couple of kilometers away, just enough fuel. Having calmed down a little, our hero turned on the radio in the cabin to distract his mind for a while. But then his attention was attracted by a bright object outside the window. David looked more closely and saw the silhouette of a child's bicycle. Its red frame, suitable for a fifth grader, was impossible to miss in the soggy grass by the side of the highway. However, the little owner of the conspicuous bike, David, could not be seen. The man felt some kind of anxiety. There are woods everywhere. You never know what could happen to a child. We should check it out. David got out of the car and looked around. There was no one near the road, but there was a long trail from the bike, clearly visible in the crumpled grass of children's feet. Meanwhile, the light rain turned into a torrential downpour. Visibility was visibly impaired, and David had only to pray to find the child in the thickening gloom of the forest thicket. As he made his way through the woods, the driver hoped that the little bicycle owner had not fallen into the swampy bogs that filled the area. He had been on this trail more than once, so he knew the map of the local woods well enough. Just then, David noticed a piece of bright pink cloth hanging sadly from one of the sharp branches of a withered shrub. Following this, the trucker heard someone's thin sobs interrupted by piteous sobs. "Money, money." A child's voice called out. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" shouted the child to David. "If so, keep talking, I'm coming to you." "Hey, what should I say?" "Uncle, please help me. I'm here." David wandered a little farther into the woods and came to a small clearing enclosed on all sides by tall, almost black pine trees in the thickening gloom around them. All David could think about at that moment was that the poor child, who must have been sitting there for a long time, was soaking wet, and he needed to get out of here right away. "Uncle, uncle, I'm here." Waving to the trucker was a sweet little girl whose pink jacket was torn right down the hem. Apparently, the little girl had come about the same distance as David. She was sitting on a gnarled log, holding on tightly to one of the long branches that came off the trunk. The little girl looked no more than 8 or 9 years old, and of course, she was shaking from the cold of her damp clothes and the rain pouring down from the sky. Wet blonde pigtails dangled from either side of her face like icicles, and water dripped from her long eyelashes. "How did you get here, girl?" David asked in astonishment. It was a remote place, even though it wasn't far from the city. "I was riding my bicycle," she explained, "but I went too far, and then I decided to watch the squirrels and the rabbit. My mother said that they are always present in the forest. You just need to approach them quietly, so as not to scare them away." "Is your bike red?" the trucker clarified. "Yes. Did you find it? My mom would give me such a scolding if I lost it." There were tears in the girl's eyes. "Honestly, I'm not sitting here on purpose. I got lost. I tried to go back out when none of the animals answered my call, but I couldn't find my way back, and the rain only made me scratch myself. Here." The little girl first pointed to her sleeve, torn to shreds on dry trunks and branches, and then pulled it up. Long red streaks were visible on the girl's delicate skin. "Oh, you need help. Let's get out of here quick. It's pouring," David exclaimed when he saw the scratches. "It's not going to stop soon, that's for sure." The man held out his hand, and the girl grasped it tightly. "I'm fine, but I was very scared. I didn't think I'd be able to get out of the woods myself." Fortunately, the trucker arrived just in time. The girl didn't look badly hurt. Apparently, she only needed to be treated for scratches. However, the wet clothes gave David a bad feeling. "Do you know your address where you live? Let me take you home. I'm going into town anyway. We'll pick up your bike and treat your wounds, because I have a first aid kit in the car." David was afraid the little girl might get a bad cold, so he picked the poor thing up in his arms after she nodded affirmatively, and carried her back to the truck. "Ow, it hurts. It stings." The girl wrinkled her nose as David began to dab her scratches with green. He and the little girl were already sitting in the huge cab of the truck. "Just be patient." The driver smiled back at her. "But no germs will attack you now. I'm not tasty. They won't eat me anyway." She giggled and then, unexpectedly, introduced herself. "My name is Molly. What's yours?" "David," the trucker responded, and threw the emerald-colored cotton into a garbage bag. "Nice to meet you, Molly. Are you hungry?" The man opened the glove compartment and took out a delicious puff pastry with cheese, and then took out a thermos of hot tea from under the seat. "Here, eat, and don't forget to drink your tea with it. I'm going to turn on the stove to warm you up." At the sight of food, the girl's eyes gleamed with joy. God only knows how long she had been hungry in the woods. "Thank you," the little girl sincerely muttered, and began to gorge herself on the food offered her. Looking at little Molly, David felt a wave of inexplicable warmth slowly rise in his heart. Her blue eyes shone with light and purity, and David felt that there was an unexpected but strong bond between him and the girl. Molly was calm and seemed to trust David so unconditionally, as if they had known each other for a long time. "So, where are we going?" asked little David when she finished her tea and puff pastry. "Can I take you to your father? He's probably looking for you by now, isn't he? Or your mother? If I were them, I'd have the whole town turned upside down looking for my daughter." Instead of answering, Molly suddenly lowered her eyes and said sadly, "Yes, of course. We'll go to Sam, but he's not my daddy at all." "Is that so?" David asked David in amazement as he started the engine. The ignition key caused the old truck to shake out before it was finally able to drive slowly from side to side into the driveway. "Well, yes," Molly said slowly. "My mother is marrying him. He's my stepfather, so he'll be mine. He's probably nice, but it's a shame I'll never get to see my real dad anyway." David was surprised by the girl's candor, but didn't say anything. After all, it was none of his business. After Molly gave him the address, the trucker went straight into town, stopping only to fill up at a small gas station on the way. There, he bought Molly an even bigger chocolate bar, so the girl wouldn't feel upset. "Thank you, Uncle. You're so kind," The girl sincerely admired him. Your children must love you very much. You have children, don't you? Ahem. David coughed in surprise. Well, actually, no. I don't have anyone. Really? Amazement flashed in the girl's eyes. How do you live like that, without children? You must be very bored and sad, right? David was silent for a moment, unsure of what to say to the child. But he glanced at Molly out of the corner of his eye and answered, Sometimes it can be sad, yes. But you see what kind of job I have. I'm always on the road, so I don't get bored. Especially when, along the way, I have to rescue little lost girls like you. Molly, appreciating the joke, laughed merrily. The rest of the way, the man and the girl spent listening to jokes on the radio, and David told his young companion a couple of funny stories from his many travels, which pleased the little girl a lot. With each passing minute, Molly seemed to David more and more intimate and familiar. Okay, David, stop it, scolded the trucker to himself. You're getting sentimental today. You must be getting old, brother, now that a strange child has stirred up such a storm of emotions in you. When David brought the girl to the luxurious 3-story mansion, he even whistled in admiration. Is this your house? It's very beautiful, just right for a little princess like you. Yes, we live here with my mother now, the girl nodded. The house impressed by its beauty and sophistication of design solutions. Cream-colored tiles and huge bay windows gave the whole cottage likeness, as if it was not a massive mansion in the new Russian style, but some Italian villa with floating supporting structures and weightless half-glass roof. At that moment, a tall, handsome man in a business suit came running out of the gate. David noticed that even though his face was young, his hair was already white as snow. Here's Uncle Sam, the girl whispered to the driver, before the businessman picked up Molly in his arms and held him tightly. Jesus, Molly. Well, thank God. Where have you been all this time? I've had all my guards out looking for you. You can't scare me like that. It's okay, the girl answered calmly. I got lost in the woods, and Uncle David found me and brought me home. The bicycle is also with me, which you gave me as a present. Don't worry. The businessman set his adopted daughter on the ground, then shook his head. You're lucky our mom went to Boston for a couple of days, otherwise she'd have had it out for you and me, wouldn't she? Just then, the man noticed the truck driver unloading the girl's bicycle from the back of the truck. Thank you, David. The men shook hands. Let's get right to the point, don't you mind? After all, you saved Molly, and I didn't even notice she'd left the yard. And she'd come this far, hadn't she? The businessman adjusted his jacket. David, you've probably figured out by now that I'm not a poor man. You can ask me for any money you want, and I will gladly thank you for saving Molly. However, the young driver only smiled and shook his head negatively. No, I don't need anything. I'm just glad I was there in time. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened to the baby. The rich man was surprised, but did not insist, only asked David for his phone number and, in return, gave him his business card. Then let's put it this way. If you need anything, any help, or if you want to change jobs, for example, feel free to call. We'll get together. David, though he did not plan to take advantage of the businessman's offer of help, took his business card and wrote down his number on his phone. After that, David went to lay, and Sam and his stepdaughter stayed somewhere far behind. Strangely enough, for some reason it seemed to David that the farther away he went from Molly, the more firmly he realized he was leaving his own heart in the hands of a little girl. David spent the next month as usual, working on the road, sleeping at his house, walking in the park on the rare weekends. Only, all his feelings seemed to be dulled. He no longer felt any resentment toward his boss, nor any righteous anger at his car, which had almost collapsed. It seemed that all the pain, resentment, but also the joy and interest in life, somewhere, suddenly, abruptly disappeared, giving place only to a cold and gray emptiness in David's soul. The man often remembered the day he had met little Molly, how he had waded through dry trees, how he had carried her in his arms, how he had fed her in his truck. For the first time, David became acutely aware of how sad it turns out to be when you have no one in your life to take care of you. The driver didn't understand why he was so moved by the story of the lost girl, but he felt that he would miss the opportunity to feel like someone's protector in his life for a long time now, maybe even a father. That night, in David's apartment, the phone rang unexpectedly. "Hello, is this David?" "Yes," answered the trucker. "And who's asking me?" "It's Sam, remember him?" The driver's heart jumped at once, and he felt the familiar anxiety. "Did something happen to Molly?" David asked, and I heard his voice tremble. No, not at all," the businessman hastened to reassure him. "That's not why I'm calling you. I'm getting married to Molly's mother on Sunday." "Congratulations," David said instantly, and he breathed a sigh of relief to know that the baby was all right. "Well," Sam went on, "I'm inviting you. You'll be one of my guests." "What?" It took David a while to understand. "It's okay, relax. The event will be a private event, just local officials and my corporate colleagues." "Didn't Molly tell you that I own most of the advertising media holding company?" "And no, I don't recall." The trucker responded confused. "Would it be convenient?" "I mean, what do you mean? I'll be there. After all, most of your friends are important. It is not proper for an ordinary trucker to come to such a private party." Sam laughed good-naturedly on the other end of the line. "If it wasn't the right thing to do, I wouldn't have invited you. Besides, Molly told me all about you. She wants to see you very much." "Well, how can I say no to a child, right?" David was all red, as if he had drunk a mug of hot tea. "Okay, I'll be there," he answered. "Do you have some kind of dress code? What you need to look like?" "No, dress as usual. Just make sure you have a decent suit. After all, it's a wedding," the businessman told him. "I don't have much time. I've got to run. I'll put you on the list if you need me." The men agreed on the place and time when the celebration would take place, and then both of them hung up. When David arrived at the door of the fashionable restaurant at the appointed time, he was somewhat embarrassed. At the entrance, there were 2-meter-tall guards, each of whom looked like a bodybuilding champion. The audience that passed him and headed confidently to the restaurant were all dressed in luxury brands and shone with real diamonds, sapphires, and other expensive jewelry. "Jesus, where did I rush off to with my face in a row?" thought David, looking sadly at his modest costume. "There's no way they'll let me through." "Who are you?" One of the bouncers looked at the trucker sternly. David said as confidently as possible. "1 minute," the guard replied, and used a handheld earpiece to relay the trucker's data to someone. After a minute, Sam himself appeared on the doorstep of the establishment. "Come on in, David. I'm very glad you could make it." After escorting the man to his table, the businessman excused himself and headed somewhere in the kitchen, where he still had to give certain instructions to the local chefs. In the brightly lit room, David felt extremely uncomfortable for the first minute. From the stage, a deafening hysteria, a mixture of club music and some popular rap tunes, poured from the huge speakers that shimmered in all the colors of the rainbow. All this was alien to David, who was used to the measured roar of the engine in his car and the quiet rustle of gravel under the wheels. At most, a young trucker could afford music, to turn on the radio retro, which played the hits of the past decades. Such music was soothing for David, but the music that was playing in the restaurant made him want to run away, or better yet, hide in some soundproof bunker. But there was one huge advantage. All the tables where the guests of the evening were seated were literally bursting with the most diverse dishes. Hot meat in pots, kebabs, all sorts of appetizers and desserts. All this, from time to time, passed by a young man on silver trays, which endlessly dragged the waiters, who were moving from one end of the hall to another, wrapped up. Each of them had a duty smile on his face as they offered champagne glasses to the well-dressed socialites to drink to the health of the newlyweds-to-be. When David sat down at a table in the corner of the room, he immediately received several small plates on which were tartlets with caviar, cheese slices, and a small piece of elegantly decorated biscuit. In addition, a glass of sparkling wine landed next to the trucker. Bon appetit, the smiling waitress told him, and then she went off to serve the other guests. Thank you, David muttered to himself, and, unable to resist the appetizing food, immediately took a bite of the tartlet. The delicate red caviar immediately melted on his tongue, and the driver concluded that he had not come to this party for nothing. After taking a sip of the sparkling drink, David relaxed a little. Those around him did not care at all. Everyone was chatting, eating, and waiting for the newly minted bride and groom to enter the improvised stage. David, as well as the others, stared at the stage. It was silly to hide the fact that his main interest was to see Molly, but nevertheless, he was curious to see the young wife of a millionaire too. After almost 40 minutes, the guests became visibly nervous. Here and there were indignant sighs and exclamations like, "Well, what were we gathered here for? What, the bride couldn't get into her dress out of happiness?" David let the small talk pass him by. Once again, he was convinced that nothing spoils people like money, especially money that wasn't earned by their own labor, but rather by a lucrative marriage or simply by inheritance from wealthy parents. Finally, the lights in the entire restaurant went out. There was only one spotlight left, which illuminated the wide, semicircular stage. A moment later, Sam appeared on it. A happy businessman led a dazzlingly beautiful woman under his arm in a snow-white dress, on which rich embroidery shimmered with silvery highlights. The embroidery pattern folded into lovely, angelic wings. The millionaire smiled radiantly and posed for the photographers, while the beauty in the wedding dress behaved much more modestly. She treaded carefully on the stage and gave the photographers a nice, discreet smile. For a split second, the girl's face seemed vaguely familiar to David. Standing up from the table, the trucker took a few uncertain steps toward the newlyweds, wanting to get a better look at Sam's bride. The next moment, David was like an electric shock. Still not believing his eyes, David took quick steps to the stage, and only then was he finally convinced. It was her. Dazed by what he saw, David continued to stare at the woman. It was because she was like 2 drops of water, similar to his first and only love, who had died in a monstrous car accident many years before. "Jenna," the trucker whispered with numb lips, "is it really you? Are you alive?" David felt the tears welling up in his eyes. He had to fuse all his emotions to keep from howling with longing and doom. Never in his life had he loved a girl as much as he loved her. A milky white fog swept over the young man's consciousness as the memories rushed in with unbridled force, taking David 10 years back in their wake. Back then, he was still living in Boston, not Leh, and working as a truck driver for a fine trading company. The young man was perfectly happy with his life at the time, and he couldn't imagine that anything bad could happen to him. If someone had told him that in 6 months he would lose everything, that he would have to flee to Leh to get lost there, and then get a job as a truck driver for the lowest-rated trucking company, he would never have believed it. But that's exactly what happened to him. When David was only 22, he met the lovely Jenna at a youth party. It was summertime, and the party itself took place in a country cottage, which was rented, as it turned out later, by his and Jenna's mutual friends. It was a funny encounter. Jenna ran into him with a cocktail in her hand and spilled all over David's brand new shirt, which he had bought for the occasion in an expensive store. "Hey, you should be more careful," the young man complained about his shirt. "It's easy for you girls, you have a million dresses. What's a poor guy to do?" The girl who spilled the fragrant potion on him only laughed. "Well, I don't have a million dresses, but you're right. I could be more careful." On Jenna, she offered her thin, perfectly manicured hand. David, who had just managed to brush his clothes off with a napkin, looked at her sideways, but shook her hand. David. All right, David. She laughed again. Do you want me to wire you the money for the ruined Lacoste? Although, to be honest, I seriously doubt that you're wearing the original and not a fake, even if it's high quality. The most amazing thing was that Jenna spoke to him simply and humanly, without any snobbery at all, though she laughed, as it seemed to David at the time, a little more than necessary. No way, the guy said doubtfully. They even put a special card in my bag with this shirt, a gold one. It also said Lacoste in big letters. Oh, the girl said, well, then you're definitely fooled. I'm sorry, but it's true. They don't sell brand-name shirts without all the extras. Only now, after looking at the girl from head to toe, David realized what a beauty he was standing in front of him. Tall, a little shorter than he was, with dark brown glossy curls, this slender brown-haired girl made an indelible impression on any normal guy. Her eyes were especially beautiful in Jenna, light brown, with small dark red speckles that made her look like a mischievous fairy or elf. David himself was also outwardly attractive, about 2 meters tall, always very fit blonde with sky blue eyes. David was the classic romantic dream of any girl. Oh, the hell with the shirt, said the boy with a smile. Do you want to dance? Jenna looked at him playfully, but without disdain, just assessing whether he could be trusted. Finally, she agreed. Let's go, she nodded. My favorite song is coming up. I asked the DJ to play it beforehand. The young people didn't notice how morning came. All this time, they were dancing, joking, laughing. But most importantly, they realized right away that they felt a mutual affection for each other. Jenna loved the fact that David behaved with both modesty and dignity, and David, in turn, was surprised to find that the outwardly flirtatious beauty could actually talk about philosophy and questions of world culture and art. As David later learned, she was a philology student at the prestigious Boston University. Doesn't it scare you that I'm Jenna? Jenna asked me once, in conversation. Why is that, I wonder? Asked David in response, quite calmly. You don't know who I am. The girl was surprised. After a second, her eyes literally rounded up. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. I didn't even tell you up front who I was. The girl explained to her new friend that most guys are afraid to date her because of her father. Nick was a powerful businessman in the banking industry and, in addition, was famous for his frankly tough character. You see, he's like that. He'll eat anyone he deems a threat to me in no time at all. Jenna snapped her fingers lightly for clarity. He even has a nickname in the professional community, White Shark. So if you're not ready to be served lunch to my rich daddy, you can refuse to go out with me right now. I won't be offended, I promise. Despite the bravado, regret and sadness were already burning in the girl's eyes. She clearly did not want to part with David, being a hostage of difficult family circumstances. Jenna, I don't really care who your father is. I want to hang out with you. Not because you're some kind of high social status in town, but because I like you. I just like you as a girl and as a person. In the eyes of the young girl flashed both lights of joy and hope, and on her lashes shimmered tiny tears. Really, that's all she could say. Instead of answering, David pulled Jenna close to him, sealing her lips with a firm, sensual kiss. The young people started dating, and after a couple of months, they officially declared themselves a couple. Naturally, this state of affairs could not help but arouse the anger of the girl's family. Nick was just tearing up and tearing down when he found out that his golden daughter was having an affair with some outspoken broke. Jenna, my daughter, how could you even mess with him? He's a pauper. Not only does he work as a driver for some peddlers, but he dares to ask you to marry him. Daddy, he loves me. He doesn't care about my money. He's not even willing to take a penny from you and Mom for our wedding. We'll just get married and live with him, just like regular people, you know. The banker only laughed hysterically. Ha ha ha. Ordinary people. Jenna, do you even hear yourself? What people? He's a pauper and an Alphonse. He's trying to get you so he can get his filthy hands into my business. You think I don't know how it is? First he asks me to hire him, and then before we know it, we're out of our pants as a family. You know how sneaky these guys are. They all look so simple. Jenna thought then that her heart was going to burst into pieces. Her father was going to deny her another attempt to build a normal, and most importantly, her own, without his total control and participation, family. But how can you think of people like that? She asked Nick bitterly. To you, everyone who doesn't earn millions is just dust, right? Of course, Dad nodded calmly. How else could it be, Jenna? You and I are playing on a different field. You have to understand that a family like ours has not only an opportunity to choose the best, but also an obligation to come into contact with the best. And this, I'm sorry, applies equally to things and people. Jenna then ran away from home all in tears, and despite her parents' prohibition, came to David. He took her in without further question, gave her a hot bath, and made her a cup of fragrant tea. We'll run away together, David told her then. Run away together from this city, and no one will ever find us. We'll start a new life somewhere, in the Urals, for example. We won't make it, David, Jenna answered, crying into his shoulder. Daddy will get us out of the ground. I'm afraid we'll only make things worse for each other by doing this. And so it happened. The next morning, Jenna was taken away by an angry father and his guards, and David was beaten, after which he found out that he had been kicked out of his job as well. Nick was angry at David to the point that he was ready to eliminate him physically, but he came to his senses in time. He decided that he did not need to get his hands dirty with this human garbage, so he decided to do something sneakier. Daddy, admit it, did you do this to get my David fired from his job? His angry daughter questioned him. He told me everything, don't deny it. Did you do it? What is it, my daughter? My father made innocent eyes. What do I need it for? If you want, I'll help your loser, of course, but you won't marry him, and don't count on it. At the same time, the banker used all his connections to deprive David of even the slightest opportunity to get a decent job in Boston. He was literally driven out of town, but he tried to resist until the very last moment, until Nick dealt him and Jenna his final and most devastating blow. One morning, a businessman brought his daughter pictures of David kissing a strange but very beautiful girl. The photos were, of course, a professional montage, but Jenna almost immediately believed them to be authentic. They were so well made. You see, my girl, the banker said, stroking the back of his sobbing daughter. I told you that sooner or later, this wolf in sheep's clothing would show himself. And so it turned out. I don't believe it. The girl choked back tears. I have to talk to him myself. Talk. Her father supported the girl, and afterwards, I'll send you to England to study. There you'll meet decent people from your own circle, and you'll forget about David, your loser, at once. Jenna didn't yet know that Nick had planted the exact same pictures, only in them, already his daughter was cuddling with some seductive stranger. Are you accusing me of cheating? Shouted then at his beloved, distraught, and having lost all hope of further life in the city of David. Then what do you have to say about it? And he threw his own provocative photos at the girl's feet. Jenna slowly gathered them up and exhaled indignantly. But it's a montage. I've never been with this man, and I don't even know who he is. I could say the same thing about your pictures. The boy flared up instantly. Why do you believe your father and not me? Yes, because Dad did everything so that you could get a job somewhere, and you turned out to be not competent enough for good positions. Jenna blurted out in annoyed Jenna. The girl was utterly confused, and in the confusion of feelings, she did not understand how she should act now, and who she could trust. Funny, David grinned bitterly. So that's what they call it now. Incompetent, the guy muttered to himself, then pointed Jenna to the door. I think you'd better leave now, Jenna, David told her in an icy tone. I'm not ready to talk to you about anything else yet. What are you? Ah, the girl growled and flew out of her lover's apartment like an arrow. So David and Jenna find themselves separated by the will of the girl's rich and angry father. However, Nick was not enough suffering of the boy, and he, after a couple of days, personally came to the young man's home to announce the terrible news to him. That's it. You bastard. You got it. The banker said with hatred, you drove my daughter so hard that she crashed to her death. There was nothing left of her. The car burst into flames at once, like a match. David lost his footing and immediately lost consciousness, something he had not expected, but such an ending to his heart story. When he came to, he found a note on his desk in which the banker urged him to flee the city while his legs were still intact. Otherwise, he could blame himself, but only the businessman gave him a 100% guarantee. David would not live in Boston for 3 days as he would be dead. He was running away to Moscow, unable to remember his grief. David wanted to forget himself and finally break up with his past. But no matter how hard he tried, the past finally caught up with him on that fateful day in businessman Sam's chick restaurant. The man did not know that Jenna did not have time to go to England at the time, because it turned out that she was expecting a child with David. It was already quite a long time, and it was too late to have an abortion. Veniamin Viktorovich had no choice but to accept reality as it was. However, this did not mean that he was ready to put up with his daughter's bystander. When she gave birth to a healthy, rosy-cheeked Molly 6 months later, Nick refused to recognize her as his granddaughter. He did, of course, have occasional contact with the child, but he took her no more seriously than a servant's daughter. So he wanted to punish his own blood, Jenna, for daring to disobey his will and for starting his relationship with David to such an extent. Since then, almost 10 years have passed. David opened all categories of driver's licenses and became a professional trucker, and Jenna gave birth to a daughter who was now almost 9. A year ago, the woman met Sam, who turned out to be a very good and decent man. The businessman was immediately interested in the young single mother from a powerful family, but Jenna was indifferent to him. In fact, they might well have remained good friends had it not been for Nick, as always. "Why are you turning your nose up at me?" said the elderly banker to his daughter. "Have you even seen who wants to propose to you? It's David. It's a perfect match for you, considering that no one would ever want to adopt you from your relationship with that beggar. In our circle, don't sweat it. Accept his terms while there's still a chance." Jenna, who by that time had lost almost all meaning in life, except for raising her daughter, agreed to do her father's will without complaint. To her surprise, Sam turned out to be a very caring and gentle man. In addition, he treated Molly well and was ready to adopt her, not interested at all in the question of her origin. Could the trucker have guessed that the girl he saved in the woods was his own daughter? And could Jenna have imagined that one day she would see the love of her life? However, it happened. They met at the wedding and now stood across from each other. When their gazes met, it seemed to each of them that he was about to crumble into pieces from the emotions and feelings that were overwhelming him. "Jenna," repeated the young man as he approached the stage, "tell me it's really you. Tell me I wasn't dreaming." The bride went pale as the moonlight. Large tears instantly glistened in her eyes. Of course, she recognized her failed groom. "David, David, darling," the woman cried out and practically fell into her lover's arms. "Excuse me, but what's going on? Jenna, do you and David know each other?" The businessman groom asked the bride at a loss. "I'm going to explain everything. Let me." David climbed onto the stage and took the microphone out of Sam's hands. The man was determined to set the record straight. "Well, Nick, aren't you interested in how I've lived all these years and how your daughter has suffered? Let me tell our dear guests all about it." And David told them everything that for so many years had been accumulated in his disfigured soul, everything that had piled up over the years. the man expressed to the secular public and the old banker, looking the latter straight in the eye. Nick was morally crushed. All his companions shook their heads reproachfully and whispered sarcastic things to each other, all in an unflattering manner. Sam himself, hearing the story of Jenna and David's 10 years of suffering, wept, and, with his hand pressed to his chest, blessed the couple. "Jenna, I wish I had known. Of course there's not going to be a wedding. What am I, a fiend? I thought you and Molly would be a faithful friend and support, but now I see you already have a worthy candidate for that place, a man who truly loves you, since he was able to carry that love in his heart, and not to lose it after all these years, even in spite of your supposed death. Be happy." Here, no longer embarrassed by anyone else, Jenna and David joined together in a strong kiss, filled with tenderness, pain, and boundless love for each other. "Wait, David, honey," Jenna whispered, pulling away from his familiar lips. "There's something I have to tell you. Molly, she's your daughter." David smiled back with a part of his lips. "I know. Even then, in the woods, I felt that we had something to do with her. You just confirmed my guess. Thank you for raising such a wonderful daughter for us." Janet's face lit up with a smile of real, genuine happiness. She hadn't smiled like that in almost 10 years. "You and I will never part again. I swear it," his beloved assured him heartily, and pressed her cheek against his strong shoulder, wet with tears. "Yay," Molly shouted as she ran up to them. "And I'm glad that you're my daddy," the girl said, and David gently held his own daughter in his arms. "I'm so glad, baby," he whispered as he kissed her blonde, soft hair. "Now we'll all have a real family." "Better late than never," Jenna added, laughing through tears of happiness as she hugged her newfound man and their daughter, so much loved. A month later, in the same restaurant, David and Jenna celebrated their wedding. Sam personally paid for the celebration because he was so touched by the couple's story that he, with his ex-fiancee's permission, became their mutual friend with David. David was only glad because Sam helped him to become the head of his own transport company, something our hero, in former years, had not even dared to dream of. Sam himself, after some time, at a common family celebration, introduced everyone to his fiancée. The couple in love was insanely happy, and a month later they planned a lavish wedding. Jenna was now a real beauty. She loved her role as a loving wife and keeper of the home. It seemed that taking care of the house only added to her outward charm and softness of character. In addition, David had a pleasant surprise waiting for him very soon. His wife told him that she was expecting a baby again. This time, the couple very much hopes that their Molly will have a little brother. From that moment on, no one else wanted to do business with Nick. The shark lost all her sharp teeth, as the press later wrote. The old banker suffered a long time from the inability to apply his professional skills and his status as a man in their social circle. But in the end, he repented of the evil he had done and apologized to his daughter, son-in-law, and his own grandchildren. Jenna and David, though not immediately, but still managed to forgive him, especially since the old banker promised that he would leave all his millions exclusively to his own children and Molly with her future brother. Now the whole family, including the elderly banker, is absolutely happy. They were able to forget all their old grudges and to build a completely different, free from prejudice and human ignorance, life.